They were erased from history, or so we were told. In 1492, Spain declared a nation purified. Jews were exiled, converted, or killed. The Inquisition sealed it. No more Jews in Spain. A clean break. A forgotten people. But DNA never signs declarations. And it doesn't forget. Centuries later, in quiet Spanish villages, geneticists started testing ordinary people. Teachers, butchers, grandmothers, none of them Jewish. At least not on paper. But the lab results shattered the myth. Hidden inside these Spanish Catholics was the unmistakable signature of Sephardic Jews. The question wasn't just scientific. It was spiritual, emotional. If your ancestors were exiled, erased, and silenced, but their blood still runs in your veins, who are you really? Could exile fail at the genetic level? The Spanish crown burned synagogues, confiscated Torahs, forced names to change, but chromosomes kept carrying the truth. Silently, faithfully, generation after generation. These weren't just mutations. They were memories, trapped in cells, passed through wombs, etched in mitochondrial whispers. A people who survived not through power, but through inheritance. And the patterns got stranger, because these markers didn't just show up in Spain. They matched distant Jewish enclaves, from Morocco to Izmir to Thessaloniki, as if the DNA itself remembered the routes of escape, the ports, the ghettos, the secret weddings, as if blood carried a map. But in some places, the line never escaped. It stayed, quiet, hidden, through marriages, baptisms, silence, whispers in basements, candles lit behind curtains. And in one Portuguese town, a secret community kept the flame alive for over 500 years. No books, no synagogues, no names, just the memory in their bodies. What did their DNA reveal? And how did they survive? When the rest were forgotten, that mystery begins now. Their blood held secrets, but the story of how that blood scattered begins not with exile, but with glory, before the fires, before the forced baptisms, before the long silence. There was a time when Sephardic Jews weren't hiding. They were thriving. Al-Andalus, the jewel of medieval Spain, a place where Jews didn't just live, they led. Advisors to caliphs, poets in court, philosophers, astronomers, physicians, Jewish voices shaping a golden world. In Arabic, Hebrew, and the language of light, you could walk the streets of Cordoba and hear the Torah in Ladino, and the Quran in Psalm. Rabbis debated ethics beside imams. Libraries overflowed with texts, written by men who believed reason and faith could share a page. It felt permanent, sacred, safe. But history doesn't keep its promises. The Christians were coming, not just with swords, but with a new idea of God, one that had no room left for difference, one that forgot what Spain had once been. The Reconquista wasn't just a war for land. It was a war against memory. And the very Jews who once built hospitals and led courts were suddenly branded enemies of Christ. Libraries that once held Jewish poetry, burned, synagogues sealed, children taken, and names, the most Jewish thing of all, erased from stones and records. In the span of a few generations, the same Jews, who were once called wise men, were now hunted as heretics. The fall wasn't loud. It was slow. Whispers in alleyways, doors shut tighter at night, families arguing whether to stay or flee. Because how do you leave a place that gave you everything, but no longer sees you as human? Where do you go when the country that gave you your name now demands you erase it? The fires were coming, but some didn't wait to burn. Some vanished into the wind, crossing seas, deserts, mountains, searching for refuge. But the world wasn't ready for them either. And exile had only just begun. They didn't just flee. They fractured. After the fires of Spain, after the betrayal from the land that once called them family, Sephardic Jews disappeared, not into oblivion, but into motion. Exile wasn't a single boat. It was thousands, drifting toward Istanbul, Safed, Fez, Salonika, each carrying names that would be changed, languages that would bend, but bloodlines that refused to die. Some became scholars in Aleppo, writing new laws in the shadow of minarets. Some sold silk in Thessaloniki's markets, trading in a dozen tongues, but whispering prayers in one. And wherever they landed, they didn't forget. They carried it, all of it. The songs, the grief, the fire. Ladino, a broken, beautiful Spanish fused with Hebrew, Arabic, Turkish, Greek. A language born from flight and spoken in homes that had no homeland. Even centuries later, you can still hear it in northern Morocco, in the lullabies of Istanbul's elders, in the old women of Rhodes who pray in the same syllables their ancestors used in Toledo. But it wasn't just the tongue that traveled. The genes did too. And today, in DNA labs from Tel Aviv to Sao Paulo, scientists see a pattern, clusters, echoes, a distinctive genetic signature, still traceable across 3 continents. It's not random. It's not myth. It's a map. One drawn in bloodlines, not borders. One that doesn't follow flags, but remembers every port the Inquisition couldn't reach. And it proves something haunting. Sephardic Jews didn't vanish. They mutated, adapted, survived. But survival leaves a mark. On the tongue, on the faith, on the body. Because exile isn't just movement. It's transformation. And when you follow that trail far enough, you reach those who never left Spain at all. Those who stayed, blended in, changed names, buried scrolls, and prayed behind locked doors. But somehow, their DNA stayed Jewish, and what survived inside them was about to be discovered. Some fled, but some stayed. After the expulsion, after the ships disappeared beyond the Mediterranean horizon, a quiet decision settled into the stone walls of Iberia. Stay, convert, survive. They became new Christians. Conversos, on paper Catholic, in their hearts something else entirely. But how do you keep a 3,000-year-old faith? When your children are taught to forget, you bury it. In basements, in bread, in memory. In northern Portugal, a grandmother taught her grandchild never to eat pork, but never said why. A father would light 2 candles on Friday night and call it a family habit. They carved mezuzahs into door frames, then plastered over them. They passed down Hebrew names, in secret, like contraband. And when the Inquisition came knocking, they recited prayers in Latin, while whispering Shema under their breath. For centuries, no synagogue, no Torah, no priesthood. But the ritual? It lived in silence. Scientists began testing DNA from these old Portuguese towns, communities with no known Jewish ties. Every ancestor in the book said Catholic, but in the blood, Jewish. Autosomal traces, unmistakable, persistent. Mitochondrial lineages matching Sephardic clusters. Y chromosomes that never converted. It was as if the chromosomes had been holding vigil, keeping faith when mouths could not. A cultural ghost, walking inside bodies that no longer knew the words, but still moved to the same rhythm. Because exile comes in many forms. And sometimes, it doesn't move across borders. Sometimes, it hides inside your own home. But the blood remembers. And in one mountain town, a group of families never stopped practicing. Not publicly, not legally, but quietly. For 500 years. With no scrolls, no rabbis, no approval. They remembered what the world tried to erase. But how? How did they keep it alive? When everything around them demanded silence. Could the blood remember what the soul was forbidden to say? For 500 years, they prayed without a synagogue. No Torah, no rabbi, just memory, passed in whispers from mother to daughter, like a secret too dangerous to name aloud. In the mountains of Portugal, the town of Belmonte held its breath, generation after generation, hiding in plain sight. Catholic on the outside, Jewish deep beneath the skin. They lit candles behind shuttered windows. They buried their dead with quiet blessings no one else understood. They knew what they were, but the world had forgotten. Until DNA opened a door. Scientists arrived with test kits, not prayer books. They swabbed cheeks, collected names, expecting confusion, maybe a trace of something Sephardic. What they found was lightning. Y chromosomes that pointed straight to ancient Israel. Mitochondrial lines identical to those found in Moroccan exiles, Istanbul refugees, Jews who had never heard of Belmonte, but somehow shared the same maternal code. It was undeniable. This wasn't folklore. This wasn't nostalgia. It was lineage, etched into the double helix, preserved not through ceremony, but through blood. And when the results were revealed, when the hidden past became genetic fact, everything changed. Names long buried began to rise again. Hanukkah candles were lit, this time in public. The Shema was sung out loud, no longer a secret rhythm in a child's heartbeat. Some wept, some feared, some felt whole for the first time in centuries. Because for them, Judaism had not been religion, it had been survival, and DNA was the proof. That silence hadn't won. But Belmonte was only one village, one survival story. The truth is there are others, scattered across continents, in towns that don't even know what they lost. The question now isn't if they exist. It's how many, and how far their roots still reach. Because Belmonte wasn't the exception. It was just the one we finally heard. The men could hide behind names, convert, shave their beards, blend. But the women, they carried something that couldn't be changed. Not by kings, not by priests, not even by silence. Because inside every daughter is her mother's DNA. Unbroken. Mitochondria passed like a sacred fire, mother to child, for thousands of years. And in Sephardic Jewish women, that fire never went out. When scientists examined mtDNA, expecting mixture, expecting dilution, they found something else. Consistency, persistence, lineages that began in medieval Spain and were still alive in the modern Middle East, North Africa, and beyond. And here's the twist. Those same communities, surrounded for centuries by Berbers and Arabs, showed almost none of the typical North African female DNA. No L haplogroups, no sub-Saharan signatures. It wasn't racism. It was memory. It was law. It was fear. These women were the keepers. They remembered what spices to use, how to braid the dough, which songs to hum during childbirth. When the books were burned, when the Torah scrolls vanished, they kept the rhythm alive. In kitchens, in lullabies, in the way they folded linens. And even when the daughters forgot the words, their bodies didn't. That's the power of mitochondria. It doesn't mutate quickly. It holds on. It whispers, I am hers. And she was hers. And we are still here. It's in the way a grandmother stirs the lentils, the way a child is rocked at night, the way candles are lit, even without knowing why. Because culture may fade, language may break, but the maternal line, it stays. Even if no one taught the daughters, their cells remembered the mothers, and deep inside those same cells lay the priesthood, waiting to be found. In the mother's line, we saw memory, but in the father's line, we found something even older, a priesthood that never died. For centuries, Jews were scattered, shattered, renamed, and erased. But among them, some men still carried a code, not in books, not in robes, in their Y chromosomes, the Cohen modal haplotype, a unique genetic signature, found again and again in Jews from Morocco, from Turkey, from Greece, from Iraq, men who had never met, men who spoke different languages, men who didn't even know they were priests. But their DNA remembered. It's the line of Aaron, Moses' brother, the first high priest, passed from father to son for over 3,000 years, marked not by crown or temple, but by a few letters buried deep inside the genome. In synagogues across the world, you'll hear it whispered, Cohen, a word that once meant sanctity, separation, the right to bless. But what happens when there's no temple left, when the scrolls are hidden, and the people you were supposed to lead don't even know your name? In Ladino and Exile, some of these priests kept the blessings alive, bent over loaves of bread, murmured at bedsides, words carried from Jerusalem, spoken now in kitchens, in whispers, in fear. And the maps don't lie. Geneticists plotted the movement of the Cohen haplotype, and the trail is breathtaking. From ancient Israel to the Iberian Peninsula, from Spain to the Ottoman Empire, from there across the seas. One priestly line, crossing continents, not by conquest, but by survival. But here's the paradox. A priest without a temple, a lineage without a land, a blessing without a congregation. And yet, the DNA still glows with purpose. So now we ask, can blood bring back what history tried to erase? Can a strand of code rebuild what was lost? A priest without a temple. Can DNA restore the altar? The priesthood survived without a temple. But what about the people who didn't know what they were part of? Not rabbis, not scholars, just men and women, born in Spain, raised in Morocco, buried in Turkey, speaking Ladino, eating olives, praying in accents that never came from Jerusalem. Were they still Jewish? If they didn't feel like it, that's where the science came in. Not history, not memory, data, admixture, principal component analysis. Two tools, designed not to tell you who you think you are, but where your blood has been. And when they ran the numbers, thousands of DNA samples from across the diaspora, a strange pattern began to glow. A central signal, deep, unmistakable, Levantine, not North African, not Iberian, not European, but ancient Near Eastern, the very soil where Abraham once walked, the line of people who left Egypt and never forgot the way back. And yet layered on top of it was Spain, Portugal, southern Italy, a swirl of Mediterranean genetics, absorbed during centuries of exile. The contradiction cut deep, because the genome told one story, and the culture told another. These were people who called themselves Turkish, or Greek, or Algerian, but their DNA placed them closer to ancient Israelites than their own neighbors. Who are you? When your genetics are older than your citizenship, when your blood carries maps to cities you've never seen, and prayers you've never heard, and when the data was visualized, clusters appeared on the screen. Jews from Thessaloniki, Jews from Fez, Jews from Izmir, all pulling toward one magnetic center. Not Spain, not Portugal, but something older, something buried deeper. So, what is Sephardic identity? Is it the languages you speak? Or the blood you don't know is speaking for you? Is it the exile you remember? Or the homeland your DNA refuses to forget? Because if the map was never Iberia, if the story never truly began in Spain, then what are we calling Sephardic at all? Is Sephardic identity about where you fled from, or where your blood began? If exile didn't break the body, belief did. The DNA map said one thing. These people were family, shared ancestors, shared roots, same ancient source. But their stories went in opposite directions. After Spain, after Portugal, some fled to Istanbul, rebuilt synagogues, and prayed in Ladino. Others found safety in Morocco and carried Jewish law into Muslim lands. But some stayed, converted, not once, but twice. First by the sword, then by silence. They became Catholics. Some became Muslims. Some forgot everything. But when scientists tested their DNA, across continents, across languages, across religions, a strange thing happened. Their genomes still linked them. Portugal, Morocco, Turkey, same base, different overlays. In one town, a family lights candles on Friday night. In another, the same lineage breaks fast during Ramadan. In another, no one remembers anything at all. But their chromosomes remember each other. It's not just poetic. It's statistical. The genetic clustering tools show it. Individuals with totally different beliefs, living completely different lives, still orbit the same ancient signal. Sephardic Jews, crypto-Jews, Muslim descendants, Catholic villagers with no known Jewish past, converging in the data, split by faith, joined by blood. The twist. None of them knew. Some were told they were Arab. Some thought they were Spanish. Some never asked. But their bodies were carrying a story that belief had rewritten. And it forces a deeper question. What happens when your soul walks one way, but your blood walks another? Who are you? If your religion says never Jewish, but your DNA says always? Can faith erase a lineage? Can a baptism change a chromosome? Can a people split by faith still be joined by blood? They were split by faith, scattered by exile, forgotten by history. But in the 21st century, They found each other through code, not ancient scrolls, not family trees, but through tiny digital swabs and algorithms built to find what time had buried. Across oceans, people began to test their DNA. For fun, for curiosity, for questions they couldn't even name. And the answers were seismic. A man in Mexico discovers a genetic cousin in Bulgaria. A woman in Brazil shares a rare haplotype with a rabbi in Jerusalem. A family in Florida, raised Catholic for generations, suddenly learns they descend from Jews exiled from Spain. The codes match. The names don't. But the patterns are clear. Clusters appear where no one expected. Communities who lost their stories, but still carry the signal. And with each test, a little silence breaks. Old names begin to surface. Selah, Eliyahu, Benvenisti. Old recipes come back. Sweet almond cakes, once baked in the shadows, now shared online in broad daylight. Burial rituals change. Family gatherings shift. Ladino is spoken again, not fluently, but fiercely. It's not just identity. It's resurrection. Because for centuries, the ancestors were mute. No headstones. No histories. Just fragments in the blood. Now they speak. Through data. Through matches. Through screens glowing in bedrooms around the world. And every discovery opens another question. How many more cousins are out there, with no idea who they really are? Because this isn't just about Spain or Istanbul. The trail didn't stop at the Mediterranean. It kept moving quietly across the Atlantic and deep in the jungles of South America. Among people who've never heard of Sepharad, the DNA is whispering again. What if the next clue isn't in Spain or Turkey, but the Amazon? The jungle wasn't the end. It was another beginning. Because what this journey proved wasn't just that exile happened. It's that exile failed. Not completely. Not genetically. Not spiritually. Spain stripped their names. Portugal burned their books. The Inquisition scattered them across continents. Rewrote their faith, buried their stories. But it couldn't erase the signal. Generation after generation, they survived not by force, but by folding themselves into memory. They became habit. They became rhythm. A melody hummed without knowing where it came from. You couldn't see it, but it was there. In kitchens, in candles, in the way they whispered blessings over bread they didn't call challah anymore. They survived by not being seen. And now, science has made them visible again. Each sequence of code, each match in a database, each cluster that defies official records, is a ghost stepping forward. The Sephardic Jews didn't need a state to endure. They didn't need monuments, armies, or flags. They became a civilization of blood and memory, a diaspora not kept alive by politics, but by mitochondria and migration. That's the power of DNA. It doesn't care what you call yourself. It remembers what the world tried to forget. But even this story, as far as it reaches, as wide as it spreads, is only one strand. There are others. Mizrahi lineages scattered through Iraq and Persia. North African communities who danced between Arab and Jewish worlds. The Anusim, descendants of forced converts, who don't even know the language of their survival yet. Their DNA is waiting. Their stories are still buried. But this much is clear. You can exile a people from a country, but not from their blood.